a travel editor, where I tend to say far more than I should, but I'm also quite happy to give people travel advice at any time. I do love traveling, having been in this game for many years.
You can follow me on Twitter at holiday_hut. Still to come on the show, how much we spend of our disposable income on holidays, and also some travel history. That's coming from Dr. Susan Barton, who's a travel historian, and she's also representing Saga, who are celebrating their 65th anniversary this year. But before that, Frank Brehany from Holiday Travel Watch. We spoke a lot about consumer stuff. We always do when Frank comes on. And what we're going to be talking about now is how airlines can sell seats on their flights without protection, whereas the rest of the travel industry has to sell the same seat with protection. And the reason this is important, you might have heard about Monarch. In September time, they were struggling to get accreditation. They were hit and miss whether they're going to survive or not. Well, they were the only airline that actually offered the protection and now decided to withdraw it. So if you buy a Monarch flight from a travel agent, there's protection automatically if the airline will collapse while you're away on holiday or before you go. Buy it direct from Monarch, there's none of that automatically. Same with British Airways, Virgin, all the same. The airlines don't have to offer protection, but the travel agent who does care about your holiday, he does, or she does. So we wanted to know how come there is this imbalance in the travel industry when it comes to selling the same product.
The simple reason is that the aviation industry is all powerful. It's extremely powerful in this country. And they have lobbied long and hard, and indeed throughout Europe as well. They've lobbied long and hard that they should be exempt from providing any consumer financial protection. I mean, I've sat in meetings in Brussels and London, and I've heard the aviation industry saying that they are a well-structured, a solid industry, and the likelihood of a financial collapse is remote. And those are the arguments they make. And those are the arguments the politicians listen to, particularly down at Westminster. And believe you me, there have been plenty of campaigners. And indeed, when I say campaigners, I'm also talking about holiday companies and trade bodies who've been arguing that airlines should also, if they're selling seats only, should also be part of the Consumer Financial Protection Scheme. As to the future, I think it'll be a long time yet before airline companies are folded into that scheme. But I do think, for various reasons I've already spoken about, it'll be interesting to see when the Minister of State starts to look at the regulations to see how far he or she will cut those regulations on consumer financial protection, or indeed lift the bar, as it were, and allow others to operate without having to hold some kind of ATOL license. I'm afraid it's very, very much up in the air at the moment because of the political certainty. But, coming back to your original point, the reason it is solely because of the power of the aviation industry, the airline industry, that they have managed to escape the clutches of having to provide that formal consumer financial protection. They're very good at selling you supplier failure insurance if you're buying insurance through them. I hasten to add, but that is the simple reason why they're not included.
So on the one hand, they're saying we're not going to go bust, you're perfectly safe. But on the other hand, here's some insurance in case we go bust and you get your money back. It's kind of having it both ways, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the case of Monarch, I think it is the case that they have decided to make a business decision based on their problems, and that business decision complies with the law as it currently stands. But we shall see. We shall see how the politicians of Westminster will react when they start to look at all of these consumer laws, and it'll be very interesting, as I say, to see what they ditch and what extra help they give to industry, which again can be detrimental to consumers.
So finally, moving away from consumer protection and all the problems with that, what changes do you see coming to the travel industry after the recent terrorist attacks with Brussels and Turkey again? Do you see that anything's going to change where people go, what people can do when they're away?
Yeah, I mean, the actual travel companies have some difficulty with this because they don't control the apparatus of the state, and so their principal role is feeding in intelligence. Say, for example, travel companies feed intelligence into the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. And they have a unique position in many countries, where they have deep relations and a very good intelligence network, a commercial intelligence network themselves. So, that needs to be strengthened, and I'm fairly confident that the travel industry are doing that. In terms of security, well, it is extremely sad that we've seen so many attacks since June 2015, and a lot of the attacks have brutally injured or even killed holidaymakers in many of these destinations. I think the telling moment for me was after the Brussels airport attack, and I was scheduled to fly into Brussels a couple of weeks later, which I did. And what was interesting was to see how the authorities there had reacted, and they had imported zoning around the airport. And when I got back to the airport that night, I had to go through 2 security checks before I even got through the front door of the terminal. And then there was obviously all the security checks in there. Some of the lessons from Brussels were not learnt, as we saw in Istanbul. And, we can use the mantra, we must not give in to terror. But what we need to do is to have a sensible conversation about how we guard our public spaces, our ports of entry or exit, and the public events. And, the recent Christmas market in Birmingham, for example, was ring-fenced with a concrete border to prevent any trucks or anything like that getting in. And, of course, the precedent that we should be learning from, not just here in the UK, but also throughout Europe, is the experiences of the people of Northern Ireland. They lived with zoning in their city centres for many years. And it does cut to the heart of civil rights. And I'm very conscious when I'm saying this that, I may be seen to be advocating, a greater security apparatus and so on. But, we have to have sensible dialogue. We're not even having that dialogue. And we need to look at these options. And we need to look at making travel safer, the resorts safer, beaches safer. Surely we should have learnt that from Sousse in Tunisia. And so whilst I'm very happy to have a discussion with people about civil rights, I'm equally very happy to discuss with people about how we best improve the conditions to make us safe. You're not going to remove any kind of lone wolf attacker, but what you do is you frustrate it. And yes, it frustrates you, the consumer, as well. But I think once it's explained to citizens and consumers, people understand that. And as we saw, in Northern Ireland, that's exactly what happened. But in terms of practical advices, I noticed the other day that the government was putting out here advices that we should all be gearing ourselves up to be able to handle first aid. And I really get that because, I've been trained in first aid in the past. It's something we should, as citizens, in my view, should always be trained in. It seems like a basic piece of our education that's generally missing. But they were saying we should understand the basic tenets of first aid. If you go to France, for example, during the state of emergency, which is still continuing and probably will continue through good parts of this year, there are posters around that tells you what to do in the event of an attack. It's either run, hide, put your mobile phone on silent. When it's safe to do so, call the emergency services on your mobile phone and tell people, the emergency services where you are, and stay put and follow the advices of the authorities. And so you're beginning to see this kind of trickle out of information. As I say, it's more evident in France, but you will see it, I think, throughout Europe, and I think we may well see it here in the UK. And I think, as part of our daily lives, whatever about going on holiday, we need to understand some of these key issues, because as citizens and consumers, we too are responsible for security, and that comes down to reporting anything suspicious, even if you're lying on that sunbed on a beach.
You can keep up to date with travel news and leave me a message at facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show. Through my part-time job, I spend a lot of time near airport security, and a lot of people are angry about the process because I don't think they understand why the tests are in place. So why is it only 100 millilitres per liquid when you can have 6 or 7 people go in, book different flights to different destinations, then go to Boots and buy a 2 litre bottle of water and then put all the liquids in and whatever. So then I think, as well as taking more action, they should explain it more as well so people understand really why the checks are there, why they have to have their soles of the feet tested because they've set an alarm off or been picked around.
Sure. Yeah. So I totally agree, John. I mean, I'm not an ordinary consumer, but I know that our airport security comes from European regulation. And the European regulation tasks each member state to make further regulation, to import the European regulation, and where it believes it's necessary to do so, to make its own regulation. And the United Kingdom has done that. And it's done that under the consolidated direction. And now I've tried to get hold of this law to understand the security measures through the Freedom of Information Act, and I've been refused on the grounds of security. Well, no surprise there. But within the raft of security regulations, there are all sorts of things covering perimeters of airports, down to liquids, down to the way you should be checked, both at check-in desk and passports and so on, and the obligations of crew and indeed passengers throughout the whole security process. And I think you're right. I think it needs explaining. The Civil Aviation Authority perhaps should do a better job at explaining the rationale behind the security measures. It's one thing to tell us that this is what we've got to do, but we're all intelligent people. Just tell us where it's originated. What's the thinking behind it? And I've seen the frustration in queues as well. And I just simply say to people, go to Ground Zero in New York City. I was there a couple of years ago, and talk to some of the people who are the guides who were there that day. And believe you me, you will come away from Ground Zero and you will never complain about airport security again. I think, for some consumers, some of them need to grow up a little, and they need to understand that there are a whole host of good reasons why these laws have been put in place. I don't say we should accept them blindly. On the contrary, but these rules are there for our safety, and they are reasonably balanced against our civil rights and liberties. But standing in the queue and moaning about it doesn't do anything for anyone. But all I would say to consumers, if you don't understand the security issues, then get online, do the research, and understand, the rationale behind it. As I say, we may, as time goes on, see more security measures, and we just have to accept that these are difficult times, unusual times, and provided our political masters are making sure